always questioned how the world works. There just seem to be so many rules, hierarchies, traditions, and inequalities that made absolutely zero sense to me. And now, the older I got, the clearer it became that these things and the way society works is often not the result of some divine logic or natural order. No, the way society works is because people with power have structured it to benefit them. As a young person, that naturally enraged me, and I always knew I wanted to do something to have a positive impact on the world. My parents suggested that I should go into politics or maybe work in an NGO, but I knew that it wasn't the right path for me, because one thing had become very clear. Money is power. And if I wanted to have a real impact in the world, I would need access to real big money, or I would be able to control money flows to have real impact. So what I did is that I went to business school, I landed a job at McKinsey, I then ditched the job at McKinsey to start a company called Female Invest, educating primarily women, but anyone who wants to join on how to manage their money. This did not seem like a great career decision when I made it. When I started Female Invest with my two co-founders, we had no money, no network, and absolutely no experience in building companies. But today, fast forward a few years, Female Invest has grown to become the world's largest financial educator targeting women. We have paying members in 135 countries. We have raised $24 million in a world where women raise less than 2% of funding. We're also on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. We've won the world's largest startup competition, and on a personal note, I've sold hundreds of thousands of books all over the world about how to grow your money. Now, this talk is about money. It's about democratizing access to wealth. And in order to understand wealth today, we need to understand the historic context. Because historically, investing has been for the few. And this was no accident. This was by design. For example, historically, ordinary people have not had access to financial education. It hasn't been taught in schools, and before the internet as we know it today, it was very difficult to obtain this type of knowledge. Secondly, financial advisors used to be something just the ultra-wealthy could afford, which meant that ordinary people didn't really have access to this type of knowledge. But there were structural problems too, keeping people from managing their money and investing. To start with, it wasn't even possible to invest online until 1994, which is interesting because the first stock was traded more than 400 years ago in the Netherlands, actually. Now, I'm born in 1994, and I think it's wild that before I was born, people couldn't invest in the stock market, or at least they would have to go to a physical place that many of you have probably seen in the movies with people screaming and waving small pieces of paper. That's what the stock market used to look like. But there were more structural challenges. In fact, there were legal challenges because 50% of the population was legally not allowed to manage their money until 1975. This number is from Spain. Interestingly, it's the exact same number in the UK, where I currently live, and around the world in Europe and the US, the numbers are pretty similar. So before 1975, women in Spain could not open a bank account, get a credit card, or get a mortgage without written mail permission. And now this effectively means that women had legally limited freedom, independence, and power, forcing them to stay in relationships they didn't like, performing unpaid labor they weren't recognized for because they weren't able to leave because they didn't have their own money. It meant that women couldn't participate in public life because they needed, as you can see here, consent from a father or a husband to even be able to work or travel. And now I think when we hear these types of facts, it's very tempting to think that surely it could not have been that bad, like surely this could not have been enforced because it's just too insane to grasp. I used to think that as well. And last year, my company Female Invest did a big campaign in the UK to celebrate the 50th year of women having these very, very basic rights. And as part of the campaign, we had a big art installation in the street. And what I remember most from it is the sheer amount of older women coming up to us and sharing their stories of how these laws shaped their lives until 1975. One woman told me that when she got her first job, she couldn't get her salary paid out because she didn't have a bank account. Another woman told me that even though she did have a bank account, she got permission for that, she couldn't loan money and she needed her father to approve in writing even tiny loans from the bank. Now imagine what that does to a person not being able to control their lives, essentially. This is also insane because in this room there are a lot of people who were born before 1975, and almost certainly all of your mothers were. That meant your mom didn't have access to her own money. She didn't really have freedom because you need money to be able to make independent choices, which, again, she also wasn't able to do. And I think knowing the historic context makes it so clear why we still, of course, have a financial gender gap today. It makes perfect sense that women own less property than men, because it's only been 50 years since we were even allowed to get a mortgage in the first place. It makes perfect sense why women invest less than men, because we just didn't inherit a narrative that investing was something we could do because we never saw our mothers or grandmothers doing it. But of course, financial inequality is not just about gender. I just had to mention it because we can't talk about financial inequality without recognizing that half the population only gained the most basic of financial rights very recently. No, financial inequality is really about all of us. As I started the talk with saying, money is power. And now the bad news today is that wealth, and thereby money, is accumulating faster than ever before in the hands of the very, very few. The ultra-wealthy are getting richer than ever before, and the middle class is getting poorer. Now, while that might be some bad news, I also have good news. Every single person in this room has financial power. And if we learn how to use our money as power, we can have real world-changing impact, every single one of us. Because every time we invest, or even every time we spend money, we cast a vote for the future we want to live in. And if we start aligning our spending and our investing with our values, it could have an impact that is not even comparable to the impact of voting at elections. To give you an example, the UN estimates that if just 7% of the money invested by private investors, so you and me, if just 7% of that went into impact investments, we could achieve the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 7%. Governments can't do it alone. They need the help of all of us. And now, it's very tempting when we hear facts like this to question it and think that surely it can't be that easy, and surely this would take a lot more money than what's currently flowing around. So I want to share an example with you. And the example I'm about to share is just to illustrate that the money is there, and the problem is not a lack of money. The problem is that the money is controlled by a group of people who do not always have the benefit of everyone in mind. So, if just 1% of military spending was used towards eradicating world hunger, we could achieve that by 2030. How wild is that? 1% of military spending, and this is according to the UN. With that, we could eradicate world hunger instead of fighting each other, destroying each other. I think that's so interesting, and I think it really underlines this point about how powerful it is when we start demanding money flowing in different directions. So why isn't this happening already? Why aren't all of us already investing with our values, making money while changing the world? Well, reality is that private investors today are facing a unique set of challenges. The first one is financial illiteracy. We still don't learn about money in schools, and for most people, their parents, who also didn't learn about money in school, is the primary source of financial knowledge. So we are a generation of financially illiterate people. The second challenge we then face is that even if we wanted to learn about managing money, it's very difficult to figure out who to trust or where to even go. Now, that's part of the reason why we started Female Invest, a company selling only education with no other agenda than teaching people the boring stuff that works in the long run without pushing any financial products ever. The good news is that despite the challenges we face, we also face a unique set of opportunities. First of all, it has never been easier to learn about investing if you start by investing your time into figuring these things out. It really doesn't have to be difficult. Second of all, it has also never been easier to start investing with even small amounts. I'm talking 100 euros, 200 euros, maybe even per month if you go wild. And if you don't know what to buy, consider starting with a handful of broad index funds or ETFs. That has historically been the winning strategy. So we do have room for changing these things. So what should you do? Well, you should do 3 things. The first thing you should do when you leave this incredible summit is to become financially literate. It sounds difficult, it doesn't have to be. Find somewhere or someone who understands the basics of how money works, and I'm talking the boring basics, I'm not talking get rich quick. Learn how to budget. Learn how the stock market works. And once you have that knowledge, it's time for step number 2, which is start investing. Again, if you don't know what to buy, consider just automating a monthly transfer into some broad index funds and ETFs. Yes, it's boring, but historically, over the past 400 years, this has been the winning strategy. And then lastly, once you are financially literate, you are investing, you feel comfortable, then it's time for the final step, which is to start investing with impact. It is possible to make a financial return while also making a positive contribution to the world. And as I just mentioned, if just 7% of the money we invest as private investors would go into sustainable investments, we could achieve the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I've been in this game now for quite a few years, and I keep coming back to this sentence, money is power. A lot of people don't like it. I'm sometimes asked to remove the word power because it's too strong, it's not comfortable, but we all need to be comfortable with the fact that this is true, and we all need to be comfortable with the fact that we hold power too. And even the small decisions we make aren't so small at all. The access to learning about money and to managing money is finally democratized, and we frankly don't have time to waste this opportunity. According to scientists, we have 10 years before irreversible climate damage will have been made. And I don't know about you, but I certainly don't intend to sit back and just wait to see if the big guys figure it out. I intend to make money while making the world better. Those of you who have children in the audience are probably also worrying about the future, and I think knowing that you have agency as well is such a powerful thing. So, with that, when you leave my talk, please remember that money is power. Thank you very much.